everyone. I'm Nancy Dunham. I'm the principal analyst for retail at Ward's Auto. Thank you so much for joining us for the Urban Science Ward's Auto Fast Chat. We are lucky today we have Tom Kondrat with us. He is the Advanced Analytics Global Lead for Urban Science, and we are excited to talk with him today about so many things, especially the EV landscape. Tom, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Nancy, for having me.
Well, there's so much to say about EVs and everything that's going on in retail automotive. But I guess I want to ask you, first of all, how is Urban Science evaluating the evolving EV landscape? I mean, I get reports every day, and I'm sure you do too, from different entities talking about that landscape. Please tell us a bit about Urban Science's evaluation.
Yeah, thank you, Nancy. So Urban Science has the unique vantage point of having access to daily industry sales data. So as the industry is evolving, every day we get information about what's going on, where sales are hot, where they're not, how things are changing. And this year, it's been a very interesting story. And I think there's really two stories. One is hybrids. So as has been reported, hybrid sales are up about 31% so far this year. And customers are finding that customers that want to dip their toe into the electric market are finding it very convenient for their lifestyle, the way they use their vehicles and their budgets to purchase a hybrid vehicle and integrate that into, their family fleet, if you will. So hybrid sales are up very much, and they're up very broadly across the country. So whether you're talking about suburban or rural or even urban, we find market demand across the broad United States. And the second story is on battery electric vehicles. And the main story there is so far year to date, battery electric vehicles are only up about 3%. Which is much lower growth than last year. But there's lots of reasons for that. And let me get into the two reasons first. And
Please.
That is that Tesla is down about 13% year to date. The Model Y is about a 4-year-old vehicle. So sales are following kind of a typical model life cycle curve. They peak about year 2, year 3. And then, competition comes out. So, Tesla's been dropping their prices to keep their market share high. But overall, Tesla's down about 13%. However, the lesser reported story is that all the other brands combined are up about 32% for battery electric vehicle sales. So that's from Hyundai, Ford, Chevrolet, Cadillac. You put all those together, and you'll see actually growth of battery electrics that are on par with hybrid growth this year. So it's kind of a sophisticated story and lots of angles there.
That is interesting. And, I realized that it has to be that so many new models have come into the marketplace too. I see that all the time as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. New models, new segments are coming out all the time. Chevrolet has a lot of, models planned this year, for example. Stellantis has, new Jeep vehicles, battery electrics coming out, and so on. So, this is really nothing new in the auto industry, right? As trends evolve, as consumer demand evolves, the OEMs on, long, slow time cycles, it takes 3 or 4 years to produce a new vehicle from scratch. So we're seeing those models come out this year. And, again, from our Urban Science perspective, we have a real good handle. We know where these sales are. And then we forecast them as well. So we have an expectation geographically of how things are evolving.
Well, I know that you personally have spent, decades forecasting and modeling with Urban Science. And obviously, Urban Science is an analytics leader, which is why I am so excited to talk to you. One thing I hear a lot is different thoughts on who's adopting what and where they live and what their generations are. Can you tell us a little bit about what geographic and demographic adoption trends you see?
Absolutely. So California has been the market leader for battery electric, since the beginning. And what's interesting is that their share of the country for battery electrics is slowly declining. So they right now are about 33% of the whole country's battery electric vehicle sales are in California. And that's down about a point versus last year.
Okay.
So we know that San Francisco market, overall, San Francisco's 50% electrified platforms of hybrids, plug-in hybrids, battery electric. So they lead the country in that regard. What's interesting is there's about 10 markets across the country, places like Las Vegas, places like Austin, Texas, Atlanta, where we see battery electric share over 15%. So 15% is a really key number because that's when over time we would predict that a market would go past the early adopter phase. Okay. So that 15% number is a really interesting one to watch because just over time we see that it's a kind of a key threshold to cross. So there's about 10 markets across the country where we see that happening. But that's only 10 markets,
I understand.
And the US is a very big place with a very diverse consumer base. So what's interesting is that hybrids then really fill in that gap across the whole rest of the country. And, if you look at battery electric share overall, it's about 8%. Okay. So 8% battery electric share. Hybrids plus plug-in hybrids are about 12% share of the country. So they definitely are slightly higher. But if you looked at a map, you'd see it just very broadly based across the whole country. So that's a very interesting story. And that's important for dealers to think about, right? Because if you go place to place, you're likely to see a very different consumer base based on where you live and what you see on the road around you.
It's funny, talking to some of your colleagues at Urban Science, I also found some of the data that they shared interesting as far as the demographics. I think there are some things you just expect and others that were sort of surprising to me. Do you want to talk a little bit about the demographics and who you're seeing adopting both hybrids and BEVs?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we look at the years of social science research, and we're Urban Science, so we like to get into the science. When you look at the social science research of technology adoption, and I think it's very important for people to remember that battery electric vehicles are not just like a brand new model that's being released. It's a technology. It changes the way you fuel your car and the way you think about how you use it and all of that. So when you look at that history of research, you find it's very normal for higher income, wealthier folks that have more options in life. They have more flexibility with their lifestyles. They have more probably vehicles in their garage. They have some ability to, deal with inconveniences of a new technology to kind of experiment with it. And they're more cosmopolitan, more international, et cetera, more urban. So we've seen that from the very beginning with EVs that's very consistent with historical adoption of any technology. Doesn't matter what it is. What's different about EVs, however, is that you see patterns that are related to pros and cons of the vehicle. So for example, people that work from home or have shorter work commutes are more likely to adopt a battery electric vehicle. People with smaller family sizes or maybe no children at all, more likely to adopt EVs. And I think that has to do with the inconvenience or the anxiety about range and all of that. And then you see things like, cold weather states where you get, bitter cold winters, more snowfall. We've seen generally less adoption. And so these are things that will probably, affect long-term adoption of EVs, not just this year, but, for the next 5 or 10 years, at least in the midterm into the future. But, it doesn't mean that there's no market for EVs or anything like that. There's really a considerable opportunity for EVs to capture. And we're seeing more momentum right now in the industry. We're seeing some uptake this year, even again, like in April and May. So it's bouncing back.
There are so many, and you've outlined some of the key ones, of course. There's so many barriers to entry. It seems, as you just said, cold weather, short commute, long commute, and so forth. And I talk to dealers all the time, and, they're frustrated by it. I wonder if you can tell me, what does Urban Science say to dealers about how they can overcome some of those barriers to entry and capture, more importantly, capture sales opportunities? Because I know there's a lot of research going on, but I wonder about the sales too.
Absolutely, right. So one thing that when I talk broadly about the subject, it's to remember that we're talking about an early adopter demographic at this point. And it's still new enough across the country that dealers should not expect every single person that walks in as a potential EV buyer, right? It's just they don't fit the mentality of an early adopter and all of that. So, you're generally probably starting with something like 10 to 15% of the population, right now at this given time. So we at Urban Science, we offer tools to help identify both at the geographic level, say census tracts or postal codes, where we see more early adopter potential. And secondly, at a household and individual level, we offer tools such as our EV audiences and custom audience tools to do targeted direct digital marketing or direct marketing to try to communicate the message and get those customers in. And then last but not least, I would encourage dealers to just do good old-fashioned awareness campaigns or social media things, perhaps with their favorite customers, their high customer lifetime value customers. They can be advocates for the technology and the EVs. I mean, the survey data shows that, 75-80% of EV owners are very happy with their purchase, that they become advocates and they tell other people about them. And that's also very true of early adopters, is that they tend to be social influencers or kind of well-connected people in general, and they like talking about the new tech. So that's an asset for dealers when they have some customers like that, maybe doing some kind of referral programs or some things like that.
Tom, this was a fascinating conversation. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you were hoping we'd discuss?
Just that we touched on it a little bit, but Urban Science is doing a lot of forecasting work in this space, and it's important to have a good plan, right? There's been some famous cases. You can look at Hertz, for example, and they made a big bet on EVs and they've scaled that back. So it's just the idea that, it's the forecasting of opportunity and of demand. This is going to happen over time, and really good forecasts, while they're never perfect, they're often very good. And ours are very good, 98% R squareds and things like that. We can show metrics, but
Nice.
yeah, so but having good forecasts helps dealers, helps OEMs plan accordingly. Where should the inventory be? How much allocation, should a dealer have? How many techs do they need to get trained and educated and all of that? So we do a lot in this forecasting space that we think is a great asset to the dealer community. We offer tools like market growth to help with for dealer level or market level studies, OEM forecasting, just to kind of look broadly at the opportunity and all of that. So we're optimistic. It's going to be a gradual and a process, but we are optimistic EVs will continue to grow for the foreseeable future. And we have data and forecasts to help with that.
Thank you so much for that. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you. And I want to thank everyone for watching this Fast Chat, Urban Science Ward's Auto Fast Chat. I'm Nancy Dunham. I'm the Principal Analyst for Retail at Ward's Auto. And I've been speaking with Tom Condrat, who is the Advanced Analytics Global Lead for Urban Science. Thank you again for joining us today.